truth is the most convincing story that maps onto reality, and that's why the central narrative is falling apart.
Right now in the United States, people should not be walking around with masks.
We must see the central narrative for the fiction that it is. We are Americans.
While elections are sometimes messy, this was a secure election.
The founders began the fight for human liberty and self-governance, and it's up to us to finish the job.
I'll tell you what, we are in a truth emergency right now.
This is the end game.
It's Monday, August 26th, 2024, the 1314th day of dystopia. I'm your moderator, Chris Paul. Let's be reasonable. A warm welcome and hello to all of you listening through a paid subscription at imyourmoderator.substack.com. You can become a paid subscriber for as little as $50 a year or $5 a month. And in doing so, you will get the ad-free experience. You'll be able to participate in the conversation over on Substack, and you'll be invited to the interactive live stream every Wednesday afternoon. And if you can't or you simply don't want to, continue listening to the podcast for free on Substack, a wide variety of podcast platforms, and of course, Rumble. All I ask is that you share it with your friends. You can find the links to the podcast, the writing, the social media, and the merch site by visiting linktree.com/I'mYourModerator. Anyone who understands the roller coaster we've been on these past few years knows we haven't reached the end yet, and there may still be hard times to come. And as we add $1 trillion to the national debt every 100 days, we could be headed for some shaky financial times. If you're like me, you're figuring out how to diversify and make sure some seeds are planted for whatever may come. And that's one of the many reasons I think Bitcoin is part of our future. But it's not only about money. Bitcoin looks to be a critical part of the next generation of technology, communications, energy, verification, and even national defense. I'd encourage everyone to do their research and do it now. And if you're convinced of the likelihood that Bitcoin is an essential part of our future, then you'll need an on-ramp. I recommend River. River empowers you to grow your portfolio without any unwanted surprises and eliminates third-party custodians, putting you in control of your assets. Open an account with no minimum purchase requirement. You can get your Bitcoin journey started with just $1. Visit partner.river.com/reasonable to create your River account today. That's partner.river.com/reasonable. Now, I know that many of you out there understand the need to diversify assets, or maybe you're looking to protect your retirement savings, but you're not quite there yet on Bitcoin. And you feel better about precious metals? I get that too. I think going in multiple directions is wise, and I do that myself. And when it comes to buying precious metals, you want to be working with a good company. And that's why I've partnered with Goldco. Goldco is a 6-time Inc. 5000 winner, 2022 Company of the Year, and they've helped people like you and me place over $2 billion in gold and silver. And I have gotten silver from Goldco. And right now they're offering my supporters up to $10,000 in bonus silver while supplies last. Don't pass this offer up. Go to reasonablegold.com now. This is your opportunity to protect you and your family from an out-of-control government before it's too late. So don't wait a second longer. Take action today. Click on the link in the podcast notes or go to reasonablegold.com now and get your free gold kit, your free IRA kit. You'll be glad you did. All right, so Donald Trump began the week at Arlington National Cemetery, attending a wreath-laying ceremony on the 3rd anniversary of the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan. Joe Biden did not attend. He is back in Rehoboth Beach after spending some time vacationing in California, prior to which he was back in Rehoboth Beach. No one really knows where the so-called President Joe Biden is these days. He's certainly not taking an active role as president, but then again, he never did. Joe Biden was not, in fact, a real president. And people thought I was crazy to say that in the summer of 2021 and the summer of 2022 and the summer of 2023. And pretty much just up till about, 6 weeks ago, people still thought that was crazy. And here we are in late August of 2024, and it doesn't look all that crazy anymore. It's now just a mainstream topic of confusion and conversation. It doesn't seem like we have a president, they say. Actually, it does. It's just not Joe Biden, and it's not Kamala Harris. And of course, it never was. They never won an election. They were never legitimately certified as having won an election. They were never legitimately inaugurated. And speaking of that inauguration, there were a lot of things very strange about that inauguration, not the least of which the Capitol was surrounded by fencing and 25,000 National Guardsmen, many of whom turned their back to the fake President Joe Biden's motorcade as it drove by that day. Joe Biden did not receive the proper cannon salute. He did not touch the wreath at Arlington Cemetery. And the fake president wasn't even able to enter the White House that evening. The duration of Joe Biden's fake presidency has been one embarrassing and shameful moment after the next. And it wasn't just the conspiracy theorists noting these things. Back on February 25th, 2021, Reuters had this fact check. Biden's wreath-laying ceremony is not evidence that he is not an official president. This is real in Reuters. I'm not making it up. I mean, I also would just say this on my own because it's obviously true, but this is an actual fact check. Social media users have been sharing a video online that highlights differences between President Joe Biden's inauguration wreath-laying ceremony at Arlington National Cemetery with those of past presidents, claiming this is evidence that Biden is not an official president. This claim is false. There were differences at Biden's inauguration due to the requirement for social distancing during the COVID-19 pandemic. Sure, it's a very important moment in the history of our nation, but they were also worried that people might think COVID was fake or something if they didn't follow all the proper protocols. That's why they could only touch that wreath for a second. And it was so cold, which is why the soldiers were wearing nondescript outfits. Sure, everything was weird, but there was a good explanation for absolutely all of it. Just like there's probably a good explanation for today when Donald Trump is there with the families of the 13 soldiers killed at the Kabul airport. Those same soldiers and those same families who got to witness the fake President Joe Biden checking his watch during the dignified transfer when their bodies were sent home. So no fake president, no fake vice president, no fake vice president's fake vice president. I guess they didn't think that this would be a worthwhile campaign photo op. It's probably better to just forget the whole thing happened in the first place. General Keith Kellogg attended the ceremony with Donald Trump. He's one of the real generals, not one of those TV generals, the kind that goes on Fox or MSNBC or CNN and talks about how Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are doing a great job and that Donald Trump was very irresponsible. It is likely no coincidence that they have H.R. McMaster on all of the TV channels today talking about how Donald Trump was always being taken advantage of by those people around him. They could just cater to his ego a little bit and then get away with anything. I guess we're just going to continue pretending that that is still true. Donald Trump is exactly who the television has always said he is. ABC News this morning covered the event in an article with the headline, Trump lays wreath to mark 3 years since Kabul airport attack that killed U.S. troops. And in it, they note that Trump will also later address the National Guard Association at the group's annual conference in Battleground, Michigan. How about that? Donald Trump, the former president, definitely not still the current president, and definitely not still the commander-in-chief, is addressing part of our military in Battleground, Michigan, home of Governor Gretchen Whitmer, Big Gretch. They actually tried to create a new identity for Gretchen Whitmer last week, Big Gretch. Oh, she's so powerful. What a commanding presence that crazy little woman has. She faked her own kidnapping, and she tried to prevent people from buying seeds at the store so that they could grow their gardens during COVID. Famines and food shortages are far less effective when people can just grow their own food. Trump not only seems far more presidential each and every day as we go on relative to the fake President Joe Biden and the fake Vice President Kamala Harris, he's also just seeming more like he's obviously president every day. He's the one taking the serious meetings with the real foreign leaders. He's the one greeting the families of our fallen soldiers. And he's the one focused on leading and unifying our country, while Joe Biden flies back and forth to different beaches and Kamala Harris runs a joy-based campaign where everyone can see that all of her quote-unquote vibes are manufactured. The fake Harris campaign spent the morning pretending that Donald Trump was scared to debate Kamala Harris, claiming that his team, his campaign, as it were, wanted the microphones to be off when the candidate was not speaking, the same situation they had in the Biden debate, because his team was worried about Donald Trump not acting presidential if the mics were still hot while the candidates weren't speaking. And of course, Trump immediately replied that he doesn't care at all. He took questions at a stop this morning. They were asking him whether he was preparing for the debate, and he said, no, of course not. Why would I prepare? I've been preparing for debates like this my entire life. And honestly, it is so weird that candidates go off to prepare for debates. You're running for president and you need to make sure you know your facts and you know how to state everything in a way that's going to be okay in front of a television audience. We're also conditioned to thinking that all of this is normal. They're essentially rehearsing a television show. And on the other side, we're being told that Kamala Harris wants the debate to be seated and she wants to be able to have note cards that she brings in. And I am just imagining a few weeks from now, pictures going around of Kamala's note cards, just like the note cards Biden used to use when he would do a press conference. But let's move past this fake campaign silliness to some fake campaign seriousness. It's not a real campaign because it's not a real election. We don't have real elections in this country. I hope that one day we can again, but that day's not today. And so we don't need to pretend. And the truth is, it's the same either way. If the election is 100% fake, it's only a battle of narratives in the court of public opinion. What will the public be prepared to believe about what the television tells us? And likewise, if the election is fully legitimate, transparent, and verifiable, it will still only be a battle of narratives. The vote total, accurately reported, fully transparent and verifiable, would simply reflect the outcome of the winner in that battle of narratives. So considering the fact that the election is not real, and even if it were, it would still only be a battle of narratives, and it would not be about these ridiculous fake news polls and ballot harvesting efforts in battleground states, of which there are none in reality. Let's talk about some stuff that actually influences the battle of narratives in a strong and lasting way. Let's pick up where we left off last week, and that is with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. coming out and announcing that he was going to suspend his campaign and support Donald Trump in an effort to make sure that the fake President Joe Biden and the fake Vice President Kamala Harris would not be believable as winners of an election to anyone in the country. They are attempting to win the battle of narratives, and they are attempting to make their victory margin in that battle of narratives too big to rig. The goal is to make it abundantly clear to each and every American that there is no way in the world that Kamala Harris or whoever replaces her could ever receive 100 million real lawful American votes, which I think is what they will give her. People seem to want to get the hose again. They keep demanding to get the hose again. And as much as we won't like it, they will probably give her 100 million votes and Trump 60 million votes. And then we can all have a good hearty laugh while ConInc attempts to frame MAGA as ready to go to civil war, while they all grovel before the regime and call the election results legitimate. It will be the most wonderful sifting of all time. But let's focus on RFK Jr. During his speech the other day, he talked about how he knew his decision to suspend his campaign and support Trump was going to make things difficult for his wife and for his friends and for his family, because Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is absolutely surrounded with Trump-deranged, child-brained communists. And of course, I know how he feels, though not so much anymore. I don't have too many of those people in my life anymore. And I'm betting that many of you have that experience as well. And obviously, I don't know about you, but I've started to hear stories about how these people are beginning to crack a little bit. Maybe finally understanding that things really aren't going in their direction. It doesn't matter what the television says. I cannot imagine having held on for the last 4 years, only to find out that I was essentially left with supporting medical tyranny, nonstop fake foreign proxy wars, rampant illegal immigration, child genital mutilation, and communist economic policies, while the only narrative defense I was receiving was from B-list celebrities claiming that we were all going to make it through on vibes alone. RFK Jr.'s sister, Kerry Kennedy, made the rounds on television this week, as did other members of the Kennedy family. On Friday afternoon, she released this statement on X, formerly Twitter. I am sharing a personal statement that my family and I have made in response to my brother's announcement. The statement is signed by Kathleen Kennedy Townsend, Courtney Kennedy, Kerry Kennedy, Chris Kennedy, and Rory Kennedy, and it says, "We want an America filled with hope and bound together by a shared vision of a brighter future, a future defined by individual freedom, economic promise, and national pride." Okay, so do we. So does Donald Trump. So does Bobby Kennedy. So you're on board. That's great. Oh, wait. We believe in Harris and Walls. Our brother Bobby's decision to endorse Trump today is a betrayal of the values that our father and our family hold most dear. It is a sad ending to a sad story. Really? A sad ending? Seems like RFK Jr.'s story is just beginning. Oh, wait, you mean he's exiled from the Kennedy family? He doesn't count as one of the good Kennedys anymore. That's what they mean. You always know when the child-brained communists begin using their poetic language and talking about history and talking about one's reputation many years from now, that they are very, very serious. This is the time for exiling. I remember being told by people in 2020 who barely knew me that I was canceled. I was like, what do you mean? Your opinions have no bearing on my life? I'm just going to keep going. They love to slam the door and tell you, we will never speak again. You're on the wrong side of history. This is a sad ending to a sad story. But no, it's not. Bobby Kennedy will join the Trump administration in some capacity, and he will pursue all of the same goals that he has been pursuing throughout his life with the support of the Kennedy family. He'll just be doing it without their support in a far more effective way. If anything, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is going to redeem the Kennedy family name because no one in that family now is doing anything worth a damn. And they're all surviving on the reputations of John F. Kennedy and Robert F. Kennedy, both of whom have been dead for 6 decades. The entire family is running on the fumes of that Camelot mythology and folklore and the iconic style of an age that ended a long time ago. RFK Jr. is arguably the only one who is carrying on any of that legacy, and they're pretending it's the opposite. It's amazing how many people feel like they can come out and speak for Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s own father in condemning RFK Jr. He's not carrying on the family legacy the right way. RFK Sr. would be ashamed that Bobby was joining forces with Donald Trump to make America great again and to make America healthy again. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has already kind of taken that on as his own thing. And it's funny, actually, because MAHA, which is what that acronym comes to, not Make America Great Again, Make America Healthy Again. MAHA in Sanskrit is the word great. So what a happy accident. Or maybe he did it on purpose. After a weekend of watching the Kennedys and other deranged and truly triggered liberals go out of their minds about Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Trump posted on Truth Social this morning an open letter to Kerry Kennedy from Tammy Bruce of Fox News. He wrote, "One of the great statements of the year from the wonderful and brilliant Tammy Bruce. Here's what she had to say. You people are awful. Despite your family's checkered past and horrible behavior of so many of the men, Americans have stood with you out of loyalty, sentimentality, and too often grief. Despite the questionable establishment of your family's wealth, the treatment of Marilyn Monroe, the general womanizing, the abandonment of Mary Jo Kopechne to her death, allegations of rape, one could go on and on. But the point is your family has stayed loyal and protective of family members who have done the most appalling of things. But the moment one of your own acts on his conscience for this country, you attempt to throw him to the wolves and publicly condemn him. Never a word for the trail of abused or abandoned women left behind by a Kennedy. But because one of your men supports Trump in an effort to make the lives of Americans better, that alone is beyond the pale. In your ugly treatment of your brother, you reveal the rot that has broken the hearts of the American people so many times over the years. Beyond that, the economic destruction of American families is something your family would never truly understand. You are not touched by the worry about having enough gas to get to work or whether or not you can afford eggs this week, if you'll be safe from walking your own neighborhood, or if your child will be safe in their urban public school, or even if they will know how to read and write while collecting their diploma. You keep doing civil rights work and public service virtue signaling, but in the meantime, make a pledge to not keep doing damage as Americans are simply looking for a way to reclaim their own futures, the safety of their families, and knowing that maybe, just maybe, they can leave their children a little better off with a future they can rely on. The condition of this country should shock everyone, even if their name is Kennedy. We know it at least shocks one of you who, like us, has had enough of the fear and hopelessness assigned to us for generations. Americans are happy to see Bobby on our side as we refuse to comply and will not go gentle into the catastrophes to which we are expected to succumb. Instead, with Trump and all who join us, we will fight, fight, fight. And I don't know much, if anything, about Tammy Bruce, but that was a great statement. And I imagine that speaks to a lot of people who deal with the falsely assumed holier-than-thou morality, which is always spoken but never actually lived by the overwhelming majority of liberals in this country. And by the way, the overwhelming majority of establishment Republicans in this country as well. And to be clear, I absolutely include myself in that when I was still a liberal. I wasn't a bad person, though I surely made my share of mistakes and did not do the right thing all the time. But more importantly, I was a hypocrite about many of these things, and I used my political posturing to receive credit for living a life that I didn't actually live. And let's go back to Kerry Kennedy's statement for just a second. We want an America filled with hope and bound together by a shared vision of a brighter future, a future defined by individual freedom, economic promise, and national pride. The agenda she and they support and have supported is antithetical to all three of those: individual freedom, economic promise, and national pride. The technocratic, transhumanist global agenda is the end of individual liberty if it were ever fully implemented, and that is where we would be headed if we continue down this path. Kamala Harris's economic policies are overtly collectivist and communist policies. Her father was a Marxist professor. She is a Marxist. And national pride? These are the people trying to fly trans flags on our government buildings, bailing out rioters who burn down our cities, and supporting professional athletes who make more in a week than the average American will earn in his lifetime, kneeling while the American flag is raised for the national anthem. But of course, it's all optics. It's all just for show. It's posturing. Of course, it's virtue signaling. It is reputation building within the party of false decorum. The important thing is to say nice things about patriotism and free markets and individual liberty. It's not to actually support them, because if you actually support those things, you kind of have to stop being a communist. And you certainly have to stop doing things that help the global regime and its uniparty presence in the United States actually implement that agenda. Now, I've been talking for years about this sifting process, and it is unfortunate because it's ultimately divisive. I did an episode a few weeks ago talking about how Donald Trump is the great divider, and that's why he's so necessary. This sifting process must occur, and the only way it can occur is when people are forced to make a decision one way or another based on some objective standard. And while I'm not arguing in the least that Donald Trump is that objective standard, he certainly is not. He does force people to choose, and he forces the conversation to be had. Because if Donald Trump is your objective standard, and he is for all of the Trump deranged, you'll eventually drive yourself crazy and end up making a lot of terrible decisions. Most of this is simply a matter of when people have had enough, and they will finally take whatever reputational costs they will incur to stand up and do what's right and say, I'm not going to go along with this anymore, come what may. RFK Jr., for his part, stopped by Fox News for their Sunday morning show, and he said this.
Wall Street Journal has this. They say it's a double-edged sword, essentially, that it may help President Trump to pick up some of your followers if they're willing to go over there. But they warn about what you would do in his administration. They say this, RFK Jr., if he's anywhere near the healthcare or environmental agencies in a Trump administration, look out. Mr. Trump's best response is to thank RFK Jr. for his support, make no promises about the future, and by all means avoid joint campaign appearances. You've already had one. Will you have others? Will you campaign for President Trump?
I'm going to be campaigning actively. I think President Trump is going to make a series of announcements about other Democrats who are joining his campaign, and I want to make America healthy again, and so does President Trump. So those are objectives. The Wall Street Journal may be worried about shareholder value for pharmaceutical companies, and I think, I talked specifically to President Trump about that issue, and he said that he wanted to leave as his legacy healthy children, and that he was unconcerned about the other implications.
I mean, honestly, who do these people even think they're trying to fool at this point? This is the Wall Street Journal's opinion column, their editorial board on Friday. It was published in Saturday's print edition. RFK Jr.'s double-edged Trump endorsement. The Kennedy scion could help Trump in battleground states, but he'd be a nightmare in government. Robert Kennedy Jr.'s endorsement of Donald Trump on Friday is best understood as a double-edged political sword. It may help the former president in battleground states, but the price could be high if it includes putting Kennedy in a second Trump administration. The Kennedy scion's endorsement remarks included a scathing attack on Democrats for the way they treated him as a candidate. It's clear that he and his running mate, Nicole Shanahan, feel Democrats played dirty in trying to keep them off state ballots and limit their reach on social media platforms. In that sense, Democrats can blame themselves for the endorsement, since Mr. Kennedy might have dropped out and not endorsed either candidate. It's hard to judge the endorsement's electoral impact. RFK Jr. has lost about half his standing in the polls since Biden dropped out of the race. Most of those voters seem to be disgruntled Democrats who are now returning home for Kamala Harris. That means the 5% or so of voters who continue to back him are probably more inclined to support Mr. Trump if they bother to vote. The Trump campaign argued in a memo on Friday that there are enough of these voters to make a decisive difference in states like Arizona and Georgia, where Mr. Biden won narrowly in 2020. In a close election, they may be right. And at some point, you would hope that the mainstream media would just become embarrassed enough to stop writing articles like that. Of course, they assume that the 2020 elections were free and fair, safe and secure, and that the reported results accurately reflected the will and intent of the voters. We know that not to be true. Did Joe Biden closely win in Arizona and Georgia? No and no. He was announced the winner by the television. And reviews of those elections have made it crystal clear that Joe Biden did not actually receive more votes than Donald Trump. So already we are in the realm of watching mainstream normies analyze a potential election outcome through an improper and false lens on the suggestion that those results accurately reflected the will and intent of the voters and that these results will, too, and that the only way to have any idea about how things might have changed since then is to look at the fake news polling. Think back to 2020 when we were told that the election was going to be all about how voters wanted to get back to normal. They wanted to unify the country, and they thought Biden would be a return to normalcy. The adults would be back in the room. Joe Biden was a moderate who centrists would be able to rally around. And sure, there were some extremists on the left, but what they really needed to do was get everyone in the middle to unite so we could finally move past Donald Trump and his supporters. Well, that didn't happen. No one sees Joe Biden as a unifying figure. No one sees Kamala Harris as a unifying figure. Democrats aren't even unifying themselves under Kamala Harris. They're just hoping to scrape off some warmongering neocons and some power-hungry grifters in the Lincoln Project and the Ron DeSantis movement and the Nikki Haley support base. They keep pretending abortion is going to carry the day. But people are far more concerned with economic issues. They're more concerned with health issues. They're more concerned with immigration. They're more concerned with ending these fake foreign proxy wars. And to the extent that they actually do want to unify the country, now they've been given an option that could actually succeed. Not something based on hashtag vibes and hashtag trust us. The people who call their neighbors white supremacists and homophobes and transphobes and science deniers were never going to unify anything but their own hate movement. But RFK Jr. says more Democrats will be coming aboard the Trump campaign. Tulsi Gabbard is expected to announce her support for Donald Trump today. I don't know why there's an announcement for Tulsi Gabbard. Apparently people care about Tulsi Gabbard. I don't understand that. There was a time when every bro in the normie side of MAGA thought that Tulsi Gabbard should be considered as Donald Trump's vice president for some reason. Oh, it'll help him win women. Oh, really? That's going to turn the tide in this fake election? Now, Tulsi Gabbard might be doing something amazing behind the scenes, and she's former military. Maybe she has a role that I'm not aware of, but saying mildly true things on television for the last 4 years doesn't really provide a great impact in my mind. I don't know why this woman is important, but apparently that's a big deal. If that's all he's announcing, that would be very disappointing. I hope that there are prominent former Democrats who get on board with the MAGA movement, and I look forward to welcoming all those people. But that is and should be seen as a sign of coming together and coalescing around proper values. That's not a negotiation where compromises are made to compromise with bad actors because we need them in some sense. People are speculating that one of those figures on the left who might come over would be Bernie Sanders, the communist, quote unquote, populist who ostensibly shares a range of economic concerns with Donald Trump based on his, again, ostensible support for workers. Bernie supports workers by promoting communism that doesn't actually support workers. I mean, if he wants to come support MAGA, more power to him. But it should be with the understanding that the whole social democrat branding is never going to work. But RFK Jr. said in his speech on Friday, we discussed it a bit here, that Trump proposed a unity party, Abraham Lincoln's team of rivals. They would all be on the same side, but representing their own unique positions and arguing forcefully in support of those positions, hoping that one side or the other will win out among the American people, and that's the policy that can be pursued. Understanding ultimately that one person has the final say, and it will be Donald Trump making those decisions. I don't know about you, but I couldn't see the point of having gone through all of this if the outcome was just to have Donald Trump leading a normie establishment Republican Party for the next 4 years, only to then anoint another normie establishment Republican to pretend to lead us forward into the future while really only implementing the agenda of the Uniparty on behalf of the global regime. That would make for a total waste of all of this time and energy. We don't actually need to compromise any of our values to win more support. Standing behind your values is what makes people want to support you. You have to make the argument and you have to win the argument so that when you do, the people you've persuaded will be genuinely on your side and willing to go out and make your argument, your case to other people who they will then persuade. And that's the point of actually winning these arguments and winning them long term, not tricking people to agree with you for long enough to go cast a fake vote in a fake election. Actually winning arguments in ways that people understand, in ways that make them want to get behind the same positions so that you can actually work towards some consensus. And that's not to say that you or me or Donald Trump cannot or should not be flexible. None of us know everything. We're not always going to make the right decisions. But that also doesn't mean that the solution is to find some wishy-washy compromise somewhere in the middle that no one actually supports and pretend that that's the best we can do. And it's amazing, isn't it, how often that exact strategy is pitched to us by both sides of the uniparty. They set up the controlled opposition dynamic. In the middle of that is something absolutely no one wants, except, of course, the regime. And then both sides pitch that to us as a compromise and the best we could ever possibly get. The point of all of this is to move on from that style of politics. And speaking of that transition, moving away from this false portrayal of American politics as a two-party system, right versus left, red versus blue, Republican versus Democrat, to our system as it's properly understood, the uniparty against the American people, finally coming into full view of everyone. This is the sort of development that will finalize that transition. On Friday evening, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. joined Donald Trump for a rally in Arizona at a Turning Point event. And with RFK on stage next to him, Trump said this.
Soon after I can't even believe I have to say this, nearly assassinated in Pennsylvania last month, Bobby called me to express his best wishes. He knows firsthand the risks incurred by leaders who stand up to the corrupt political establishment. When you stand up, you bring on some trouble for yourself, but you have to do what's right. You have to do what's right for the country. I will tell you, we are both in this to do what's right for the country. That's one thing I can tell you. He lost his father and uncle in service to our country, and Bobby himself was subject to repeated threats to his safety during the course of his campaign while being denied protection by the Harris-Biden administration. And this is a tribute in honor of Bobby. I am announcing tonight that upon my election, I will establish a new independent presidential commission on assassination attempts. And they will be tasked with releasing all of the remaining documents pertaining to the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. And they will also conduct a rigorous review of the attack last month.
Now, I'm not one of those people who's ever become obsessed with the JFK assassination. I haven't spent years going down all of those rabbit holes, but I do understand that that is one of the great mysteries in our world. It's probably the greatest mystery in American history, but it's only a mystery because our government that is meant to be of, by, and for the people has taken it upon itself to usurp the authority of the people and prevent them from knowing the truth about the assassination of an American president. And that is applied to every president who has sat in that office since November of 1963. Now, there's at least good reason to believe that the CIA was involved, that the military-industrial complex was involved, that George H.W. Bush was involved, and that the establishment on both sides of the aisle has participated in this grand cover-up for now over 60 years. What will it mean when that grand cover-up is finally ended? How will the Bush family and dynasty look when the JFK files are fully released? And that's before you even get to the 9/11 files. The Bush dynasty has been one of the power players in the Republican establishment now for that long. So what does that mean for all of their underlings within the Republican establishment? and within so-called conservative media. What does it mean for all those people who lined right up behind Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley and all of the never-Trumpers of the last 9 years? Why did they do that? What was it they were protecting? And again, it doesn't matter if those Republican primary campaigns in the fake primary were just kayfabe operations designed to draw out that Republican establishment. They've been drawn out. They continue to show themselves now in response to the RFK Jr. thing. One of the lead DeSantis simps, Steve Deace of the Blaze, was out there worried that Donald Trump, who already wasn't conservative enough, was now going to be even more liberal with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Trump's administration would be somewhere between Rudy Giuliani of the 90s and Bill Clinton of the 90s. He pretends to have a lot of sway with evangelicals, and he told them it was up to them to make the moral choice on which one out of Donald Trump and Kamala Harris would be the least bad, after, of course, having folded on the usurpation of the United States of America. Just knew the election was stolen, watched it happen in broad daylight, talked about it for a few months, and then shut himself up for the last 4 years and went back to being never Trump. Jenna Ellis, of course, was on board with that. Seth Dillon from the Babylon Bee wanted to let everybody know he was very concerned with Trump's position on abortion because Trump said something on Truth Social on Friday evening about protecting women's reproductive rights, pretending that somehow Donald Trump, who put the 3 justices on the Supreme Court who overturned Roe v. Wade, he was going to be pro-choice now because Bobby Kennedy was pro-choice. Think about the phrase, women's reproductive rights. The phrase reproductive rights is already an inversion of language by the communists to imply that there is some natural right for women to eliminate their pregnancies. But the way actual reproductive rights are violated is via unwitting sterilizations through Big Pharma's products and the manipulation of our food supply. And of course, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. talks about these things directly. Donald Trump is going to continue doing these things because they trigger all the people who need to be triggered. And those people immediately come out and show everyone exactly who they are. Of course, people like this won't like Robert F. Kennedy Jr. crossing the line and coming to support Donald Trump. They talk about how this election is an existential moment for the United States of America. We need to do anything possible to win this election. But as soon as they're finished saying that, they immediately return to criticizing and critiquing Donald Trump anytime they have anything to criticize or critique, forgetting that, of course, we are in an information war. Maybe they don't even realize it, to be honest. They watched an election stolen in broad daylight and looked the other way. So maybe they don't realize how important it actually is. Maybe saying all those things is just part of their branding. But it's crazy that they just cannot stop advising Donald Trump, who is a master of communications and narrative manipulation. They can't help themselves when advising him on what he needs to say, how he needs to change his messaging to appease them in the middle of an info war. It's absolutely crazy. So Trump is going to have this commission. He's going to assign Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to this commission. Maybe RFK will have a bigger role than that. Maybe he'll be attorney general. Maybe he'll head one of those agencies, but that seems wrong. Those agencies should probably be eliminated altogether. Or maybe he'll be vice president. But regardless, we're going to see those Kennedy files probably within the next year. And at that point, the last pieces will be added to that puzzle that represents the greatest mystery in American history. And finally, we assume it will be solved. It will be interesting to see how that is rolled out. I assume that it'll probably be rolled out in similar fashion to the Twitter files. I hope it's not the same brand of limited hangout that we saw with the Twitter files. But I would bet that it would arrive as a prepackaged intelligence product that will then be distributed by various quote-unquote journalists, probably all of whom are in that Peter Thiel information op that we have discussed many times. Now, speaking of that very same information operation, we have a new chapter in the internet censorship storyline. This is from the New York Times today. Telegram founder's arrest part of broad investigation, French prosecutors say. Prosecutors in France said on Monday that Pavel Durov, the entrepreneur who runs the Telegram messaging platform, had been arrested in connection with an investigation opened last month into criminal activity on the platform and a lack of cooperation with law enforcement. And that's critical to understand that the investigation was opened last month. You'll see why in a second. Mr. Durov, 39, was detained on Saturday at Le Bourget Airport near Paris after landing on a private plane from Azerbaijan. He has not been charged and remains in custody, which can be extended through Wednesday, according to prosecutors. Laura Bacau, the Paris prosecutor, said in a statement that the arrest was part of an investigation opened on July 8th against person unnamed on a raft of potential charges, including complicity in the distribution of child pornography and selling of drugs, money laundering, and a refusal to cooperate with law enforcement. The investigation is being handled by cybercrime and anti-fraud specialists, Ms. Bacau said. It is within this procedural framework that Pavel Durov was questioned by the investigators, she said. It is unclear whether any of the charges listed by Ms. Bacau will be held against Mr. Durov. In France, complex criminal cases are handled by special magistrates who have broad investigative powers and can place defendants under formal investigation, charging them when they believe the evidence warrants it. But the magistrates can later drop charges if they do not think evidence is sufficient to proceed to trial, and cases can take years. Mr. Durov's arrest has become a flashpoint in the debate about free speech on the internet. President Emmanuel Macron of France on Monday dismissed accusations from supporters of Telegram that the arrest was an example of government censorship. The arrest of the president of Telegram on French soil took place as part of an ongoing judicial investigation, Mr. Macron said in a statement posted on X, formerly Twitter. It is in no way a political decision. It is up to the judges to rule on the matter. It was an unusual step for Macron, as French leaders usually refrain from commenting on the early stages of criminal investigations. France is deeply committed to freedom of expression and communication, to innovation, and to the spirit of entrepreneurship, Mr. Macron wrote. It will remain so. Telegram has long been on the radar of law enforcement agencies because terrorist organizations, drug sellers, weapons dealers, and far-right extremist groups have used it for communicating, recruiting, and organizing. National governments, especially those in the European Union, have intensified pressure on technology companies to address disinformation, online extremism, child safety, and the spread of illicit material. And it's amazing how much they care about all those other subjects when those issues become good cover for allowing them to censor political dissent that happens to be well within the bounds of normal conversation. And as far as I'm concerned, that's why it's key that this investigation only started last month. Because, of course, none of these problems would have just started last month. It's just that now, censoring that normal political dissent has become a more pressing priority. The article concludes this way. The arrest of Mr. Durov, who was born in the Soviet Union, could further strain relations between France and Russia, which are already at a low point over French support for Ukraine in the war against Russia. The Russian embassy in France said in a statement on Sunday that it had asked French authorities for clarification on the arrest and requested consular access to the Telegram founder. Mr. Durov, whose net worth was estimated by Bloomberg at more than $9 billion, left Russia in 2014 after he lost control of the VK website, the Russian equivalent to Facebook. The year before, he had founded Telegram, which is now based in Dubai, UAE. Mr. Durov has citizenship in France and the UAE, according to Telegram. In a statement on Telegram on Sunday, the company said, "It is absurd to claim that a platform or its owner are responsible for abuse of that platform." Mr. Durov, the company added, has nothing to hide. And they are right, of course. They are blaming Pavel Durov for the things Telegram's users do on the app. And if that sounds familiar, it's because all of the things that Telegram users are said to be doing on the Telegram app are the same things people have been doing on apps like Twitter and Facebook and elsewhere for well over a decade. It's not a secret. These things have been discovered. Entire limited hangout operations have been run to let the public know, yeah, this stuff does happen on those platforms, but don't worry, they're all developing tools to hopefully one day shut it down in the future. The idea here is that Durov is being punished and these other tech oligarchs are not, because they've been active participants in fulfilling the demands of regime-oriented governments when it comes to censorship. Whereas for the most part, Telegram is open and uncensored. Telegram has a slew of its own problems, including the bot problem and the spam problem. But your post isn't going to be labeled mis or disinformation, and you're not going to be banned from the platform. If you follow a channel on Telegram, you're going to see that channel's content most of the time. There are restrictions on certain phones, certain carriers, certain locations, and it's really hard to know whether or not they are shadow banning or restricting access to certain posts for certain people, but it's possible. From the platform's perspective, they actually do comply with the demands of governments, but not when it comes to censorship. Here is the prosecutor of the Republic statement coming out of France. Pavel Durov, founder and CEO of instant messaging platform Telegram, was arrested at Le Bourget airport in the outskirts of Paris on Saturday, the 24th of August, then taken into police custody at 8 p.m. This measure comes in the context of a judicial investigation opened the 8th of July, following a preliminary inquiry initiated by Section J3 Junalco, which is apparently the cybercrime division of the Paris Public Prosecutor's Office. This judicial investigation was opened against a person unnamed on charges of complicity, webmastering an online platform in order to enable an illegal transaction in an organized group, refusal to communicate at the request of competent authorities information or documents necessary for carrying out and operating interceptions allowed by law, so they weren't helping the government intercept communications. Complicity, possessing pornographic images of minors. Complicity, distributing, offering, or making available pornographic images of minors in organized groups. Acquiring, transporting, possessing, offering, or selling narcotic substances. Offering, selling, or making available without legitimate reason equipment, tools, programs, or data designed for or adapted to get access to and damage the operation of an automated data processing system. And organized fraud. Apparently, Durov is complicit in all of these crimes by virtue of being the owner of the platform. And they go on. Criminal association with a view to committing a crime or an offense punishable by 5 or more years of imprisonment. Laundering of the proceeds derived from an organized group's offenses and crimes. Providing cryptology services aimed to ensure confidentiality without certified declaration. Providing a cryptology tool, not solely ensuring authentication or integrity monitoring without prior declaration. And importing a cryptology tool, ensuring authentication or integrity monitoring without prior declaration. The investigative magistrates in charge of this preliminary judicial investigation have requested a co-referral of the Center for the Fight Against Cybercrime and the Anti-Fraud National Office for the pursuance of the investigations. It is within this procedural framework in which Pavel Durov was questioned by the investigators. All right. Now, I obviously do not know what kind of person Pavel Durov is, so there's no point in defending him personally, and we can leave that aside. If he was actually involved with any of these crimes, obviously we can hope that he is punished to the full extent of the law. But that seems highly unlikely. They are going after him because of how he runs that platform and the fact that people are allowed to communicate openly and freely in an uncensored fashion in an app that works smoothly and quickly and provides a near perfect user experience. I have said for many years, I think Telegram is by far the best social media app in terms of its technology, and it has been my primary platform for nearly 4 years now. This set of claims is more or less the same set of claims that we have heard routinely over the last 10 years. They were made against Twitter, but only after Elon Musk took over. They were made against 4chan and 8chan and 8kun. They were made against Gab and Parler. They were made against the Donald.win. They present a litany of bad things that can be done online, say that those bad things are done on the platform, and then use the possibility of those bad things being done in order to shut down or censor the platform, except when they already control the platform, like Facebook and Twitter prior to Elon, maybe still now, YouTube, Snapchat, TikTok, etc. The idea being that it is somehow the responsibility of the people who own and control that app to make sure that nothing bad is ever communicated on their platform. That would be like your landline telephone providers being prosecuted for every crime that involved people communicating at some point between the invention of the telephone and the moment at which people began to primarily use their mobile phones for communications. Alexander Vindman, that sniveling Ukrainian twit who served as an impeachment witness in the Trump-Ukraine impeachment hoax, posted on X, formerly Twitter, while Durov holds French citizenship, is arrested for violating French law. This has broader implications for other social media, including Twitter, Vindman wrote. There's a growing intolerance for platforming disinfo and malign influence and a growing appetite for accountability. Musk should be nervous. And of course, that's exactly wrong. We have already had the wave of intolerance for what was called misinfo. We've had all the groveling servants of the regime explain to us how important it is for them to be able to censor us because we are saying things that they don't want us to say. They call it mis and disinformation. But if it was mis and disinformation, it wouldn't seem like they'd have such difficulty convincing people that it wasn't actually true. And of course, the real problem is that these are the purveyors of mis and dis and malinformation. They are actual propagandists who are in the process of building a false reality. And that false reality is threatened by people understanding the truth and communicating it with one another. That is why they are so opposed to political dissent. You don't need the propaganda and the censorship if people actually agree with you and think the things you're saying are true and right and fair and just and noble. You need propaganda and censorship when the people despise you and you don't want anyone to actually know that what you're doing isn't popular and that no one actually voted for you or supports you. Alexander Vindman and his friends might be experiencing a growing intolerance for what they determine to be mis and dis and malinformation online. But like the rest of what they support, that is not a majority position. If anything, people are turning and running in the opposite direction. They want more free speech. They want less influence from authoritative sources. And in terms of accountability, who's trying to evade accountability? People like Alexander Vindman. No one's clamoring for Elon Musk or Pavel Durov to be held accountable for allowing free speech on their platforms. Joe Lonsdale, who was a co-founder with Peter Thiel at Palantir, and describes himself as a philanthropist, responded to Vindman writing, "Sic semper tyrannis, you authoritarian scum," to which Alexander Vindman replied, "These MAGA tech bros, free speech absolutist weirdos, saying that they're a platform not at all responsible for moderating content are really triggered. France took action against the founder of Telegram for running a platform that facilitated all manner of criminal activity, including child porn. The EU has been increasingly stringent on enforcing content regulations on social platforms. Enforcement is only likely to increase. Maybe you should be more concerned about the fact that your nominee for POTUS is a sexual predator with well-documented ties to Jeffrey Epstein. And one might wonder if that's the sort of mis and dis and malinformation that a person like Alexander Vindman would be concerned about if Vindman himself wasn't suffering from total inversion within the false reality. Or it could be, I know, small chance, but it could be that Alexander Vindman is just a malicious liar and he is projecting onto others that which he is concerned about for himself. Now let's travel back in time about 5.5 months to early March, when we heard about the illegitimate Congress determining whether or not they were going to pass legislation that would ban TikTok from the Google Play and Apple App Store unless TikTok was divested from its parent company, ByteDance, in much the same way that Trump attempted, quote unquote, to implement back in 2020. We were told, including by normie conservatives, that this was only about TikTok. It was only about China. It wasn't going to affect other apps or other platforms. It wasn't a free speech issue. It was about adversarial nations being able to wield undue influence inside the United States by way of these social media platforms. Well, here's what I said on March 8th of this year in an episode called TikTok. TikTok says this is an outright ban, despite Congress noting there is an option to avoid the ban by divesting from ByteDance. So it's not just TikTok. TikTok is the target of the PR campaign to pass this bill, but this bill doesn't target only TikTok. Again, the bill would allow the FBI and other intelligence agencies to identify social media apps under the control of foreign adversaries, such as TikTok. Then the president could ban these products from online app stores. Okay, so what if they decide there is some foreign connection to Telegram? And of course, there is a foreign connection to Telegram. Telegram is owned by a Russian named Pavel Durov, who was also the founder of Russia's kind of quasi-Facebook called VK. We've seen the regime and the media go after Telegram before. Do you want the fake president to have the power to force the app stores to remove Telegram from the App Store so that all the millions of Americans who are on it can no longer use it? Is that something we want to empower the illegitimate president to do? And so here we are in late August, 2.5 months before this fake election, in a period of rapid disclosure and exposure, a period of rapid political change, the awakening accelerating at a pace that would have been difficult to imagine only a few years ago. And what do we have? The first shot fired in the battle to eliminate Telegram from the conversation. Pavel Durov didn't actually commit any of the crimes that are mentioned, but they're suggesting he's complicit in all those crimes. And the act of detaining him made all of this an international news story. People with strong reference points to this conversation, people who understand what Telegram is, people who are familiar with Pavel Durov. And a lot of people are, because he did an interview with Tucker Carlson a few months back. They're going to understand that this is a shakedown and that this is for the purposes of censorship. But people who don't have that frame of reference at all will see Pavel Durov, Telegram, and this list of awful crimes he's supposedly complicit in committing. And what will they think? Telegram is bad. Pavel Durov is bad. And then they will quickly understand that all of the bad people use Telegram. The people who aren't allowed to communicate on their good, safe platforms, they're going to go to Telegram and talk about all those bad things that are destroying the country. And they've already been given moral license, including by conservatives, to go after the platforms themselves. So how long will it be before we start to hear about how maybe Telegram needs to be removed from the App Store the same way that TikTok would be? They've already given themselves permission, and because people, quote unquote, on our side would rather posture as being strongly anti-China than stick to any discernible principle, they've already given the Uniparty permission to shut down additional communications platforms. And so, as I said in early March, I expect that we will see that happening soon. Now, again, I don't think any of this is going to work. I don't think Pavel Durov is going to end up in prison. If he's detained past Wednesday, I'd be shocked. The regime, its media, and its supporters can try to play this any way they like. It's not going to work. As I said, Alexander Vindman is totally wrong on what people actually care about. There is no move toward increased censorship to get rid of mis and dis and malinformation. If they thought this would be good PR for the regime and bad PR for Telegram, I look forward to that blowing up in their faces. But it's important to remember that protecting free and open speech is a principle that we can and should always defend, while China bad is an idiotic sentiment that ends up putting even some smart people in some very bad positions. I will be back tomorrow at the same reasonable time on the same reasonable podcast network. I don't have a network. Masks and lockdowns don't work. They lied to you about a pandemic, and Joe Biden will never be president.
In my mind, that's the end game.
If you're listening for free and would like to support the show, the best way to do that is by signing up for a paid subscription at imyourmoderator.substack.com. You can find the info stream over on Telegram at t.me/veryreasonable. The merch site is cancelcouture.com. And for all my other links, you can visit linktree.com/imyourmoderator. And I'll see you soon. Down on the range.